I don't know if anyone remembers last April, if anyone grows veg in their outside space, you might remember that last April was the coldest and driest April on record. Who remembers a thing called April showers? Anyone? Yeah. That's not a thing anymore. It just doesn't rain in April anymore. And I'm acutely aware of that because I grow some little bits of veg in my garden. And, these aren't one-off anomalies anymore, like the summer of 76 that was. These are like regularly happening, breaking the previous record climatic events, and they're just more frequently happening, which, and there are farmers around the world who are living on that front line of climate catastrophe who are already having to adapt because they have no other choice. And so I think it's even more essential for us sort of in the West to look to these people, learn from them, and watch what these ingenious things they're coming up with to deal with their problems. And that's where practical action comes in. And the reason I love practical action, if you guys don't know about what they do, really go and visit their stand. But I think they're great because they're not about painting over rust. They're not about putting a plaster over a wound. They actually go in on the ground and empower the people themselves to elevate themselves out of poverty, to improve their own situations by empowering them with the knowledge and the tools and the expertise to be able to do that themselves. So it's a really empowering thing. So on that note, why don't we now talk about some of the really cool things that are happening around the world that practical action are helping with, and the things are just so great. So Sanjeev, let's start with Nepal and tell us a bit about what the rice farmers are doing there.
Yeah, so thank you, Leyla. So have any one of you been to Chitwan? Have any one of you heard about Chitwan? Yeah, so gentleman in the front row knows. So Chitwan is in southern plains of Nepal, around like 150 kilometers from Kathmandu. There we started rice stock farming. So it sounds something different. So when they plant rice, after 15 days of planting rice, they release ducklings into those rice farms. And ask me what those ducklings do. So
what do those ducklings do, Sanjeev?
Okay, thank you, Leyla. So when the ducklings paddle through the rice, it creates like they not only eat all those pests, and they also eat all the unwanted weed. So people, they save extra labor, so they don't need to go and weed on their own. So that's extra thing. And when the ducks, the ducks dropping, they work as fertilizer, natural fertilizer. So you don't need to put chemical fertilizer. And the rice that results from those farms, it's totally organic. So the farmers get an extra price for that in the market. And after they harvest the rice, they can sell the duck, and even they can eat the meat. So it's not only nutritious for the family, but they can earn extra income. But there's more than that. So let me tell you a little bit about that as well. So some of the scientists, I forgot his name, his team's name, but if you Google it, you'll get to know it. So they found out that when the ducks paddle in the rice field, they just suppress methane gas. So rice is one of the, largest what do you call that? It emits a lot of methane, and it causes greenhouse gas emissions. But when the ducks paddle through the rice field, they also suppress methane and nitrous oxide. So it also helps the environment. So in a way, we came out of with this idea. Actually, it's not our idea, but the farmers, they used to do it for a long time, but we came up with something standardized thing. We got literature from Takuo Furomi, if I correctly pronounce his name. He started rice duck farming in Japan long time ago, and then it was adopted by countries like Indonesia, Vietnam, and all of the countries in Southeast Asia. Many countries, they have rice duck farming, and in in Nepal, I mean, like I met with one of the farmer who has been doing rice duck farming. He said that, oh, we used to do this kind of farming long time ago. Our grandparents, they used to release like ducks in the rice field. But some of them, they used to say, oh, don't release the ducks in the rice field, they'll eat all the rice. But I'm like, you guys came up with this idea, and they again started, and I'm like, their yield, it increased by almost 13%.
Wow.
And not only that, 13%, and besides that, as I mean, like mentioned earlier, now they have like this nutritious duck meat as well, and their rice, it's organic. So yeah, so these are small little things that Practical Action does, and because of that, the same thing has been adopted in Western Nepal by another organization called Dan Church. Some of you might have heard about that. So Dan Church Aid. So they have started again another project, and many people, I mean, like they said, we also want to start rice duck farming. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? So yeah, they come to us. Thanks.
So it's so clever. It's like it's basically using the symbiotic relationships between two systems. You know, growing rice and then the inputs and outputs of a duck. And it reminds me of basically a wetter version of having chickens in like a permaculture system. So chickens are great because they give you eggs, but also they are naturally, if you move them around a growing site, they will naturally scratch out the pests and eat the pests. They're great weeders. They fertilize the ground, and they provide you with eggs and chickens. So you can get these chicken tractors, which is like a movable pen where you can get your chickens to sort of mob graze one area, then move them over. And it sounds like a very similar thing. And it's like such a simple thing, but so brilliant, because not only are these farmers getting rice, but they're now getting valuable duck meat also that they can earn an income from. So Sanjeev, if a farmer is interested in starting duck rice farming, what's the process? What do they receive?
So the farmers, they have group. They generally do collective farming. So they have group of farmers. So when another group of farmer, if one group of farmer wants to start the rice duck farming, that they can come to Practical Action, or they can talk to their colleagues, another group of farmer, I mean, who is already doing rice duck farming. It's quite easy. It's not technical. They'll just tell you that, I mean, like this certain breed of ducks, they suit better for rice duck farming. You need to know about that species of ducks, and besides that, after 15 days of I mean, planting the rice, you should release the ducklings. And another thing is that you should cover that whole area so that your ducks, they don't fly away from that place and get to another
different
people's farm. Yeah.
And so when this idea was developed, what problem was it developed to overcome? Was it just poverty so that the farmers could have another line of income? Is that what it was?
So actually, it came up, I'm like, we had this challenge. So there was an open call for innovations. So a donor called Grand Challenges Canada, they came up with a call for some innovations. And then our team thought, the farmers have been practicing this for a long time. Can we just pitch this idea to the donor? And they said, oh, you guys can, I mean, like, start a pilot project. And it was really successful. So, I mean, like, we didn't start it on our own. I mean, like, somebody, I mean, like, germinated that idea, and we added our ingenuity to it. Yeah.
And if a farmer is then earning more money, how does that change their lives? Like, what can they then afford to do that they couldn't maybe do before?
Yeah, and that's a good question. Thank you. And I met a farmer actually who is also a Chaudhary. So he said that earlier, I mean, like, he had a small farm, and till now he has a small farm, but his yield has grown, and his rice is organic, and added to that, he has this duck meat, so his income has increased. So what he has done is that he has leased another piece of land from another big landlord. So he has increased his farm area, and he's doing more farming. And from the money that he has earned, he has bought a piece of land in Chitwan. Again, it's a city area. So actually, I don't know. I mean, like people, they start. I mean, like first they start to buy a piece of land. They send their children to school. That's the general story of every farmer.
Wow.
But I guess it helps them grow. I mean, like income-wise, and it also helps them be dignified in the society. Because I guess, I mean, like if you have big farm, if you have a lot of money, and if your children go to good school, then people say, oh, this is a important person.
Yeah, if it means a farmer can then send his children to school, that's pretty life-changing. Andy, have you got any examples of cool projects going on around the world?
Yeah, so the only other thing I'd like to add about the duck farming that I love is the fact that ducks survive much better in floods, and a lot of the farmers have to deal with flooding, and obviously a chicken tends to struggle when there's water everywhere and a torrent of water, whereas ducks, they just swim and fly away and survive. So that's my other
That's a good point, yeah.
bit that I love about duck farming. I was going to talk a bit about Sudan actually, and what we've done there to help people cope. So when we have a lot of Darfurian colleagues who are sort of embedded in the communities that they work with, and so they were talking about how when the rains come, they flood, and they helped map where the floods actually take place in Darfur and where the water flows. So together the villagers committed to putting their labour towards building dams. And when we talk about dams there, they're huge. They're sort of about a kilometre long, possibly even longer, and very different to the dams you imagine here. They're not very tall, so they're maybe a kilometre long and 3 feet high, 4 feet high maximum. And then they have a stone bit in the middle where they act as a sort of funnel for the water to come. And they can be blocked off so that the water can stay. And so they constructed those dams with our support. And now when it rains, the water is kept and retained, and it actually helps make the soil much better quality. So the soil that's left behind it gains a load of nutrients, and also they're able to let the water flow through in a more managed way, but still very much using the environment. And again, this is an ancient technology that's been used for years, but had fallen into disuse really because of the conflict there. And so now they've got better soil. We also help them replant trees in that soil, and the trees grow much better. And that helps prevent desertification, and it also helps provide more nutrients for the soil. And then we also work with the farmers to introduce new ways of farming. So that's using a crescent technique where they build a very, very small sort of lip and over a huge area of land, and that helps stop soil runoff and retains the moisture. And we work with them on diversification as well. One of the big issues is that the changing climate means their traditional crops like sorghum are plagued by new pests and weren't growing as well. So again, we work with them and talk to them about different crops, using native crops as well. So we introduce some of the older seeds that they used to have. And basically, what we do is our staff, who are farmers themselves, will grow a crop next to their crops. And at the end of the season, we'll go, da-da, ours grew better than yours. And they will then they'll win them round, and they're much more interested in learning and training in those techniques. And basically the increase in diversification, the increase in crops, the retainment of the water makes a huge difference to people's incomes. And we combine that with a peace building process that we do there. So obviously one of the main issues there is conflict. And so we really we bring people together over lunch. That's the way we found that everybody
Over
will
food is always a good idea to have important chats.
Yeah, everyone will turn up for a free lunch. So we bring the pastoral community together and the farming community together, and we just get them talking about sort of both the issues that both sides have, and they form committees whereby they actually will bring perpetrators of robberies and killings to justice in a way that just wasn't happening before. And building that trust between the communities is something that allows that development to take place in a way that you just can't develop if there's conflict. So it's a really, really clever combination of different inputs that all combine to completely change a community. I went to one village, and there was just the most enormous party taking place when we arrived.
Wow.
Yeah, and they were just celebrating that they'd grown a load of stuff and were selling it, and they were, our local member of staff was sort of being flung around. It was absolutely
That's
fabulous.
so lovely.
Yeah.
I forgot to mention at the beginning, there's time at the end for questions, so because I'm already thinking of some questions when I'm hearing about these. So if you got any, do save them and we'll ask at the end. Sanjib, there's some cool stuff going on in Bangladesh, I think. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so we have really some interesting projects going on out there. So I'm one of the luckiest person to get to Bangladesh and many other countries and see our project work. Mm-hmm. So one of the things that we have been doing there for like many years is floating gardens. So any of you have you heard about floating gardens?
Floating gardens.
Yeah. So you're from Practical Accent, so you can talk about that. So Bangladesh, it's in the much lower plains than Nepal and India. So all the water that flows from the Himalayas goes into India and then goes into Bangladesh, from Bay of Bengal into the ocean. But that brings a lot of problem for them, because most of their land they get inundated all the time. Not all the time, but around 7 or 8 months they are underwater. So the farmers, they had been doing this sort of floating thing earlier, but Practical Action just tweaked the idea. We did a little bit of ingenuity. So we made bed of water hyacinth, and on that bed of water hyacinth you put some soil, and then you plant vegetables, okra or any sort of green vegetables. It grows perfectly there. So it floats on the water. So you can imagine, for the 7-8 months the whole land, it's inundated by water, but there's the floating garden. People can go, on a boat, and then pluck all the vegetables and sell in the market.
So the platform is a bed of water hyacinth.
Water hyacinth.
And then the garden is made on that.
Yeah.
That's cool, right? That is 100% cool.
And then I'll also talk about another interesting idea that we came up with. Actually, it's not the idea that we always come up with. It's we just tweaked the idea that I told earlier. So farmers, they have we have small plots of land. Farmers, they have small plot of water. So in that, they have a cage, and in that cage, they grow tilapia fish. Mm-hmm. So have you heard about tilapia?
Mm-hmm.
So tilapia fish. And on that, again, they have a floating vegetable garden. So all the droppings from the fish, just like the ducks, it works like fertilizer. And the vegetable that grow on that plot of water, not land, plot of water, you can sell that in the market and you can eat it. And it's not only nutritious for a family, you can get extra income that as well. So these are the two projects that I really like from Bangladesh.
That's incredible. So then when the rains come and the water levels rise, it doesn't matter, because the gardens are already floating. They're already on the water. That's incredible. So I recently learned about an innovative farming technique that's happening in Zimbabwe called Fumvudza. And this was developed actually by a local NGO trying to answer the question of how much land is needed to feed a family of average size of 6 in Zimbabwe. And based on the idea that a family needs 1 bucket of grain per week to form their staple diet, they came up with this concept. So 1 bucket of grain is about 56 cobs of corn. So if you say that 1 corn plant produces a minimum of 1 corn cob, you need 56 plants for each week. There are 52 weeks in a year. So for 1 year of food security, you need 52 rows of 56 plants. And the patch of area you need for that is about half the size of an Olympic swimming pool. So it's not big. And from Woods' idea, it's about the farmer focusing his attention on the planting hole itself. So rather than preparing the entire area, which is quite time and resource and labour intensive, they actually just focus on the planting hole. So you've got the planting hole, you put in your compost, you put in your seed, that hole traps water and you just mulch that hole, and it's all very manageable because a plot half the size of an Olympic swimming pool is easy to manage, easy to weed, and also easy to hand water from harvested rainwater should there be a mid-season drought. And that is then 1 year of food security for an entire family from a small area of land. And I think the numbers are 1.8 million households are looking to sign up to this initiative, which means that they get input and assistance from the government, and each of those households can expect to harvest 1 tonne of corn from 2 of those size plots, which is, I think, an incredible thing, and also makes so much sense because it frees up so much of the time and resource of the farmer and it sounds so simple, but it takes, I guess, a lot of work to go in and actually sort of train the farmers up on this knowledge so that they are able to do it. So I thought that was awesome. Any other cool projects that we should know about?
Yeah, Andy, can I go ahead? Yeah. So I would also like to talk about one of the projects that I'm really, really proud of in Bangladesh. So what we are doing out there is that we are collecting all the waste from municipality, the whole municipality. We segregate the waste, and all the kitchen waste, it's turned into manure. And not only that, so in Bangladesh, most of the household, they have pit latrines. So all the fecal sludge from that pit latrine, it goes to a fecal sludge treatment plant. And after that, when it gets dried, then we just pack them in small bags, 3 kg, 5 kg bags, and it goes to the farmers. So recently, one of my colleague, Ruth, she went to Bangladesh, and she met a farmer called Liaquat. He grows flowers, and he has 2 plots of flowers. In one plot, he uses chemical fertilizer, and in one plot, he has been using that co-compost. We call it co-compost. So the flowers from the grown by co-compost, they look really healthier, and they have more flowers. So you can see. So other farmers, they are now also encouraged to use that co-compost, which comes out not only from the kitchen waste, but also from the fecal sludge that we get from the toilets. So that's again, yeah.
So it involves collecting what is a waste product and actually turning it into a product of value that can actually be sold to farmers. So that not only improves their crops, but is actually made an income stream, I guess, for the people who are doing this job of collecting the waste. Is that right?
Yeah, and it's good for environment as well. And it reverses the soil degradation that I was talking about earlier.
Yeah, that's incredible. Yeah, wow. Any others, Andy?
Actually, one of the main issues we found was that people didn't want to use the compost because it was considered dirty. And actually, again, we convinced them by showing them what a difference it made to the actual product. And as soon as people see it working and delivering in terms of income, people are bought into it. And again, the flower farmer is one of our sort of key salespeople, if you like, really sort of selling the idea to his community.
It's kind of like, it reminds me of compost toilets. Anyone got one? One day, anyone used one? Yeah, they're cool, right? I fell into a black hole of compost toilets on YouTube the other night. I was like, I really want one. And then I was like, how do they work? And I was like, really need to understand. And I was watching videos until about 1 a.m. So that's what I was doing the other day. Right, I think we've got time for some questions. If anyone has any about maybe some of the specific projects that these guys have talked about, or what's the meaning of life, we'll take any and all questions. This young lady at the front. farming?
Do you recommend the duck rice farming to people?
Do we recommend the duck rice farming to people? Yeah. Well, I mean, if anyone is growing rice, I'm not sure they would be in this country, but elsewhere, would you?
Yeah, we would too.
Yeah. Does anyone have chickens here? Over there. Do you, the lady with the chickens, do you use them in a way to sort of, do you use their outputs at all? Like, just the eggs. But now you might have learned, because similar to the chickens, they can help to fertilise and pick out the pests and the weeds and stuff. It's quite similar to that. It's cool. I think there was...
Mine are free range in my garden, and all they do is dig up the flowers.
They can do that as well, yeah. I think there was a question down here.
I've only just arrived, so sorry if you've already covered this.
It's all right.
Two questions. I think you've already answered one, but I was going to ask for a comment on what's most impactful, communication with government, communication with the public, or communication with farmers. And then my second question was, do you do anything involving boosting pollinator populations and biodiversity of pollinators?
Okay, so the first question there is what's most impactful? Communication with governments, communication with the public, and then the second question was, do you guys do things about helping with biodiversity and pollinators and stuff like that?
So first question, I'll take the first question. So, yeah, the first thing is that we work with individual farmers, but if you work with the government, then it gets more impact. So we have been working with Department of Agriculture, and we have been training their extension officers. So they have like knowledge center in each of the districts. So they can talk about this rice stock farming and all of the sort of ingenious ideas that we have come up with. And it really makes that difference. Because when government people talk about these ideas, people listen to them rather than from NGOs.
And pollinators, anything on that?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things that we do. So diversification is one of the absolute key things that we promote because it offers more ways of earning a living, basically. So in Peru and Bolivia, we work with farmers to introduce beekeeping. We teach them how to build hives, effectively, and then link them up with markets to sell honey. So that's a form of diversification that we do there. And there's a number of other bits of diversification we do. We also work with them to help them understand the dangers of slash and burn coffee farming. So what was happening there were people were migrating to rural locations without the skills really needed to grow coffee, and slashing, burning the land, growing coffee, which only actually yields well for about 3 or 4 years before that yield declines. So we train them in a thing called layer farming, which basically introduces a number of marketable crops. So yucca, which is a low growing vegetable or fruit? I don't know. A low-growing thing. And then that provides mulch and improves the quality of the soil. Then there's coffee plants that grow higher. And then we also introduce things like bananas, which provide shade for the coffee. And coffee plants are horribly fragile things. And then we also have introduced the idea of hardwood pensions. So we encourage farmers to regrow the native hardwood species, and they take like 25, 30 years before they're fully developed. But when they do develop, they can cut them down and sell them, and it's a pension scheme. So that wood is really valuable and provides a long-term income. So yeah, that's one form of diversification. We also teach them how to rear guinea pigs as well, which is a Peruvian delicacy, and must be one of the greenest meats in the world. Guinea pigs basically mature in about, I think it's about 3 months.
Wow.
Yeah, and are a delicacy there. So
They get pretty big, huh?
They do.
They're not like the guinea pigs we have in cages in our
Yeah,
houses.
yeah.
They're like kind of huge things.
Yeah.
One of the things I love about the projects that go on in Practical Action is that I get ideas for my own garden when I hear about what they are doing. So I live in southwest London. I've got a very small urban garden. I try to grow some stuff, and this layer growing. It's kind of also like a permaculture way of growing, where you use the shade from some plants and you can sort of grow more in one space. So, for example, I've currently got a squash which outgrew the slugs for the first time in ages. It's been trained up a bamboo. Squash has big leaves, which creates quite a lot of shade for my alpine strawberries underneath, which were fine in the 40 degrees. And I'm pretty certain it's because of the shade the squash was providing. It reduced the evaporation from the soil. And when we were talking before about mulching, I would like to share a tip that I've found to be very good. You know, if you order chilled, like food that gets delivered at home, often chilled meat, it comes in what do you call it? Sheep's wool insulation. Sheep's wool is a great insulator. So I grow a lot of my veg in pots because I don't have a lot of soil space, and I mulch the top of the pots with sheep's wool. And I ran out of sheep's wool, so there's one pot that didn't have sheep's wool, and the difference in the amount of water that had evaporated from the two pots in the recent heat was incredible. So you can have that one for free. It's a good tip. Any other questions? We've got a couple of minutes left. Wow, we've got like 0 minutes left. But if there are any other questions...
Yeah, there's a question from lady in the red here.
Oh, hello, yes. The compost for the project happening in Bangladesh, I think. Yeah.
So they have been using for other products as well, not only flower grower. So this flower grower, he's our darling because he earns a lot of money, and then he's like a brand ambassador for us. But a lot of other people have been using it in their garden.
But the question was, do we know if it's making the vegetables more nutritious?
We cannot say whether it's more nutritious, but I mean they are really good and they produce more.
Yeah. Well, folks, I think we're out of time. Thank you so much for your attention. We hope you enjoyed that. Do please head over to the Practical Action stand. Try on that VR set. You'll get into Kenya. It's so cool. And Sanjeev and Andy, thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks,
folks. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.